So today we'll be analyzing the Holy Trinity with the Virgin, Saint John, and donors by the famous artist Masaccio. I'm Paul Rahani.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Eduardo, and I'm covering title and artist. So for artist, Masaccio was born on December 21st, 1401, and died in the year 1428. He was the first painter in the Renaissance period to incorporate Brunelleschi's linear perspective. And although he painted this the Holy Trinity, he had patrons who were in the art that contributed to that painting. He lived in San Giovanni Valderano, Italy, and he worked on the Holy Trinity in the Dominican Church of Santa Maria in Florence. He produced two other pieces, but were unfortunately lost in time. He introduced a more natural perspective to his paintings during the Renaissance period. Next slide. The title and subject is obviously the Holy Trinity with the Virgin and Saint John and the donors. We have the Holy Trinity. We have God as the Father, the Son of Christ, and the Holy Spirit. We have the dove. We have the Christ crucified, the Virgin Mary, Saint John, and the patrons. The patrons are on the outskirts of the painting, facing up at Christ, obviously in prayer. We have the Virgin Mary across from Saint John, also looking up at Christ as a way of us being able to talk to God through the Virgin Mary and Saint John. We also have the Memento Mori, which is below the patrons, showing the skeleton laying on a tomb. The significance here is saying that death is inevitable, and that eventually we will pass and we will be forgiven by Christ. This painting is very important to me, or has significance to me, because as a Catholic, all these ideals that is represented in this painting is also incorporated in my everyday religion. Next slide.
So I'm Paul, and I'll be covering the date. So the date of this image was from between 1425 to 1428, but most historians believe that it was painted in 1427 when Masaccio was only 26 years old. Throughout that time, we look at the shift from the old ancient Byzantine art into the more realistic art with the depictions of the Christian figures from the Christian faith. At that time, we also look at the location of where this painting was drawn, which was in Florence, Italy, which was the home of the Renaissance in that time. And so we see this happened right after the 1425, the victory of the Florentines from the Duke of Milan. And so they, at that time, they had the ideology that they were really, God was really pleased by them and their actions. We see the two donors, as Eduardo mentioned in his slides, the Lenzi family and the Berti family. The Berti family were very wealthy, and they were the supporters of this image, and they are depicted on the left side of the cross of Christ. And then on the right side, we have the Lenzi family, and they were a working class family who also are believed to have supported this image. And the tomb, actually, that is right there in 2012, they recently discovered that it belongs to the Berti family. Throughout the image, we also see the influences of that time of the Renaissance with the Ionic capital columns from the left and right side of God, and the cross, and then holding up the whole arch off to the side. The two larger pillars are the Corinthian, where we see all the significant details in the columns.
Cool. I'm Jonathan, and I will be doing material and medium. So beginning, Masaccio's Holy Trinity is a fresco, and as we learned in class, a fresco is a painting technique first introduced by ancient Mediterranean artists, and was reintroduced in the early Renaissance. The fresco technique requires water-based pigments to be applied to a wet plaster. In Masaccio style, there is no requirement for a binding agent such as an egg or a different. Instead, the pigment and the wet pilaster form a reaction which hardens and securely fixes the pigments onto the plaster as they dry. Okay. The sizing of the fresco offers a proportional mastery of perspective from top to bottom. Looking at the painting, Masaccio manipulates perspective by including a coffered ceiling, a barrel vault, pilasters, and columns as an extension of the building into a different room. This use of linear perspective conveys a sense of receding depth in the building. The paint is also done in a pyramidal form with God the Father and the Holy Spirit above Christ on the cross, beneath him Mary and St. John, followed by the two patrons, and at the bottom the memento mori. Masaccio placed the fresco precisely along the sight lines of the center of the aisle of the church, and it is slightly larger than life size, sorry. The fresco stands at about 667 centimeters by 317 centimeters.
So when we look at the location, as I stated before in the slides about the date, the location is still the same. As Jonathan mentioned, it is a fresco, so it is placed literally into the wall of the building, and it is in the Santa Maria Novella in Florence, Italy. When this basilica was first built, the structure was, when you enter, the original location was right when you enter, you see this great image that Masaccio has painted as an entryway for the first audience of the image, which were the worshippers. Today, after expansions to the basilica, following the recent expansions in 1820, we see that it is now along the left aisle, but it still holds the same prestige and high self-esteem that it did, when it was first drawn. The purpose has shifted, yet it has stayed true to itself, from going from a religious meaning into a more artistic way, similar to almost all arts. The location of it is very, very significant, as, like Jonathan mentioned, when you look at it, Masaccio has built it with such a perspective. When you look at it, it looks as if, with the linear perspective going into it, as if it were an addition to the church, not actually an image with a 3D rendering, and it kind of makes it seem a lot like as if you're looking at another room from the church. So that concludes our slides. Thank you for watching, and we hope that you get a chance to go visit the Santa Maria Novella in Italy and get a chance to see this wonderful painting. Thank you.